Imagine standing beneath the night sky, not in the modern world of telescopes and satellites, but as one of our ancestors 10,000 years ago. The air is cold, the world is silent, and above you stretches a canopy of darkness pierced with glittering fire. It does not look infinite. It does not look empty. It looks solid. A dome. A vault arched overhead, its surface embedded with stars like jewels hammered into the ceiling of heaven. And for thousands of years across every culture, that is exactly what humanity believed it was: the firmament. The firmament was not a metaphor. It was not poetry. It was the architecture of the cosmos itself, described in ancient scriptures, carved into stone tablets, whispered through myth. Genesis declared that God created the firmament to divide the waters above from the waters below, a solid expanse stretched out like beaten metal, holding back an ocean of celestial water. The stars were not burning suns but lamps, hung within this vast dome. The sun and the moon moved across its surface like clockwork gears. To look at the sky was not to see infinity, it was to see the roof of creation. This was not only Hebrew belief. In Mesopotamia, the Babylonians imagined a cosmic vault, a hammered-out sky separating chaos from order. In Egypt, the goddess Nut arched over the world, her body the star-filled dome pressing against the earth. The Greeks would later inherit and refine the concept, building systems of spheres that cradled the planets, the firmament marking the outermost boundary of the visible cosmos. Everywhere you look in antiquity, the sky is not void, it is structure. But here is the paradox that grips us even now. Why did this vision of a dome above us endure so powerfully across so many civilizations? Why did humanity cling so desperately to the idea that the heavens were solid, protective, ordered, when the evidence of comets and meteors, wandering stars and shifting skies whispered otherwise? Perhaps the firmament was not mere ignorance. Perhaps it was something deeper. Humanity's first attempt to impose order on chaos, to draw a line between the infinite unknown and the fragile world we inhabit. Perhaps the firmament was not just a cosmology, but a survival strategy, a story to shield us from the terror of infinity. Think about it. To imagine the sky as endless void is to face the unbearable, an infinite abyss above, indifferent and empty, stretching without end. For early humans, this was inconceivable. To live under a roof, even a cosmic one, was to live in safety. The firmament was our first wall against the horror of nothingness. And yet, the texts, the myths, the scriptures hint at something more unsettling. Waters above and below, windows of heaven that could open and unleash floods, stars that could fall from the firmament like shattered glass. Was this cosmology merely metaphor, or was it memory? Did ancient humanity encode in myth some experience, some catastrophe, that convinced them the sky itself was fragile, capable of breaking? This is where the story of the firmament becomes more than theology. It becomes mystery. Because even as science dismantled the dome, Galileo's telescope revealing moons of Jupiter, Newton calculating celestial mechanics, Einstein expanding space-time itself, the imagery of the firmament never died. It lingers in our language, in our symbols, in our subconscious. We still talk of heaven above. We still imagine the sky as ceiling, the stars as lights. And when we peer at the edge of the observable universe, when cosmologists speak of horizons beyond which we cannot see, are we not describing, in modern terms, a new kind of firmament? The firmament was humanity's first map of the universe. It was our first attempt to draw boundaries around infinity. And in that act we revealed not only how we saw the world, but who we were. This is where our journey begins. We will travel back into the deserts of Mesopotamia, into the temples of Egypt, into the scriptures of Israel. We will walk with astronomer priests who charted the heavens, with prophets who thundered of floods pouring through heaven's windows, with medieval monks who enshrined crystalline spheres in their cosmologies. We will follow the firmament as it rose, as it rained, as it cracked and shattered beneath the weight of science. And we will see how, in strange ways, it survives even now, not as literal truth, but as metaphor, as warning, as archetype. Because the question is not only whether the firmament was real, the question is why it mattered so much and why we may still be building invisible firmaments of our own. Look up tonight. The stars do not look like suns scattered through infinite space. To the naked eye, they still resemble what our ancestors saw: a vault, a canopy, a dome. Perhaps we are not so different from them. Perhaps the firmament is not dead. Perhaps it is reborn every time we struggle to make sense of a universe that refuses to fit within our grasp. So the journey begins under that ancient dome, a ceiling hammered by divine hands, a boundary between chaos and order, the firmament, humanity's first map of the universe. But beneath the soil of history, questions whisper. Was the firmament only myth or memory? Did it protect us or blind us? And most haunting of all, if the firmament was our first attempt to explain the cosmos, what attempts are we making now? And will our descendants look at our models with the same mix of awe and disbelief? The dome of heaven waits. The journey has begun. The night sky has always been more than a backdrop. For ancient humanity, it was the greatest text ever written, a vast script stretching from horizon to horizon, its lines etched in starlight. And like any text, it begged to be read. By the 4th millennium BCE, in the river valleys of Mesopotamia, the firmament became more than myth. It became a map. Babylonian priests, the first astronomers, climbed ziggurats to watch the stars trace their paths. They charted their movements, recorded their risings and settings, and inscribed them onto clay tablets. But they did not see infinity. They saw precision within a dome. The sky was a machine, a vault hammered into place, turning with perfect order. From this vision came calendars, harvests timed to the appearance of certain constellations, omens drawn from eclipses, predictions of planetary conjunctions. The dome was no longer a passive ceiling. It was an active, breathing mechanism, a cosmic order that revealed both the will of the gods and the destiny of empires. To map the firmament was to read the divine mind. The Babylonians were not alone. Along the Nile, Egyptian priests watched the star Sirius rise just before dawn, heralding the annual flooding of the river. This cycle was so precise, so dependable, that it became the heartbeat of their civilization. The firmament here was embodied in Nut, the goddess whose arched body spanned the world, stars glittering on her skin. Each night she swallowed the sun. Each morning she gave birth to it again. The vault was alive, divine, and to measure it was to honor the order it embodied. Notice the paradox. In both cultures, the firmament was both divine and mathematical. It was a god, and it was a clock. It was myth and science woven together in the same breath. For these ancient peoples there was no contradiction. To study the dome was to worship it. To chart the heavens was to serve the gods. But the deeper they mapped, the stranger the questions became. The Babylonians noticed that while most stars held their place, a handful wandered. Planets. To them, these were divine messengers, deities themselves crossing the firmament's surface. Yet their motions defied the perfect order of the dome. Why did Mars pause in the sky, retreat, and then march forward again? Retrograde motion, a cosmic puzzle against the backdrop of a perfect vault. The firmament was orderly, but it was not simple. In Egypt, the careful alignment of temples to solstices and equinoxes testified to the precision of the dome. The firmament was not only a ceiling, but a ruler against which humanity could align stone and ritual. At Karnak, Sunlight pierced sanctuaries on sacred days. At Abu Simbel, shafts of light illuminated statues deep within the temple only twice a year. These were not accidents. They were engineering feats guided by the dome above. The heavens had become blueprint, ruler, prophecy. And yet, beneath this devotion lurked a haunting question. Why should the gods care to write their messages in the sky at all? Why embed fate in stars, in eclipses, in planetary conjunctions? Did the firmament conceal as much as it revealed? To map it was to attempt mastery, but mastery of what? The dome remained a wall, impenetrable, unreachable. Humanity could measure its surface, but what lay beyond? This was the call to adventure. To read the heavens was to begin a journey into mystery, into a cosmos both knowable and unknowable. The firmament was no longer just protection. It was invitation. The dome challenged humanity to seek deeper order, to ask questions that stretched beyond survival. Why do the stars move as they do? Why do eclipses blot out the sun? Why does the moon wax and wane? Each answer, inscribed on clay or carved in stone, pulled us further into the adventure of cosmology. But this adventure carried risk. The heavens were not simply neutral data. They were alive with meaning. A misplaced interpretation could doom a king or topple a dynasty. A comet flashing across the dome could ignite terror, for it seemed to violate the perfect order of the vault. The firmament was not only map, it was omen, and omens carried consequence. Still, the adventure continued. From Mesopotamia spread the practice of celestial mapping, through Persia, into Greece, across the Mediterranean. Each culture inherited the dome and inscribed new meaning onto its surface. The call to adventure was universal, irresistible. To look at the sky was to be called into mystery, to feel the pull of the infinite disguised as order. Here perhaps lies the heart of the firmament's enduring power. It was not merely a wall, it was a mirror. In its order, humanity saw divine will, cosmic purpose, the possibility of certainty in a chaotic world. But in its anomalies, its wandering stars, its eclipses, its comets, humanity saw mystery, danger, the reminder that the vault might one day crack. This duality, order and chaos, certainty and doubt, is what kept the firmament alive. It was both comfort and challenge, protector and puzzle. And as cultures mapped it, they were not only charting stars, they were charting themselves. The dome reflected their fears, their hopes, their longing for meaning in the darkness. But adventure always carries cost. The more humanity charted the heavens, the more cracks appeared in the dome's perfection. Retrograde motions, irregular eclipses, unpredictable comets, each anomaly was a wound in the vault, a whisper that the firmament might not be as solid as it seemed. And with each crack, the call to adventure grew louder. So the tablets were inscribed, the temples aligned, the myths woven into constellations. Humanity answered the call, not yet knowing that to map the firmament was to begin dismantling it. For in trying to measure the dome, we set ourselves on the path that would one day break it. The firmament was our first map of the universe, our first attempt to impose order on infinity. But as with all adventures, the moment you set foot across the threshold, you cannot turn back. The dome of heaven would not survive unbroken, and the next stage of our journey reveals how resistance to this call grew fierce, as guardians of tradition fought to defend the vault of heaven against those who dared to question its perfection. The call had been heard. The adventure had begun, but the refusal of the call loomed ahead. Every great journey begins with hesitation. To leave behind the familiar, even when cracks appear in its surface, is to risk collapse. And so it was with the firmament. Humanity had heard the call to adventure, had mapped the heavens and measured the dome. But when anomalies began to emerge, when the vault's perfection faltered, many refused to let it go. The firmament was never just a theory, it was a worldview, a cosmology that bound society together. It ordered religion, ritual, and kingship. To doubt the firmament was to doubt the gods, the priests, the very structure of civilization itself. And so resistance rose, fierce and determined. In Mesopotamia, Babylonian astronomer priests clung to their celestial omens even when observations grew troublesome. Retrograde motion, Mars pausing in the sky, retreating, then advancing again, was woven into ever more elaborate interpretations. The dome could not be wrong. If the stars defied expectation, it must be humanity's understanding that failed, not the heavens. New tablets were inscribed, new layers of meaning imposed. The firmament remained intact, even if reason strained beneath its weight. In Egypt, the goddess Nut still arched over the earth, her body a celestial vault, swallowing the sun at dusk and birthing it each dawn. To imagine otherwise was not only heresy, but sacrilege. The dome was divine. It was not to be questioned, only revered. Priests aligned temples to its cycles, ensuring harmony between heaven and earth. Doubt was dangerous. Doubt was disorder. Even among the Greeks, where philosophy began to stretch its wings, resistance persisted. Early thinkers like Anaximander speculated on infinite space, daring to imagine worlds beyond our own. But their ideas found little traction against the entrenched model of concentric spheres, crystalline shells encasing Earth, each carrying planets and stars with mechanical precision. Aristotle himself defended the heavens as perfect, immutable, divine. The dome was no longer hammered bronze, but a set of nested spheres, elegant, eternal, unchanging. To deny them was to deny the very logic of nature. Why such resistance? Because the firmament was more than a sky, it was security. A ceiling above meant protection. A structured cosmos meant meaning. To suggest the dome did not exist was to pull the roof from over humanity's head, exposing us to the horror of infinite void. Few dared to contemplate such chaos. The refusal was not only cultural, but personal. Imagine the farmer who times his planting by the stars, the priest who prophesies by eclipses, the ruler whose legitimacy depends on celestial order. To admit the firmament's fragility would unravel their world. Better to cling to the dome, even if evidence whispered against it. And so myths adapted to maintain the illusion. In the Hebrew scriptures, the firmament remained firm, the heavens declaring divine glory. When floods came, it was said that the windows of heaven had opened, letting waters pour through the dome. Even disaster was folded into the cosmology. The firmament was not questioned, it was reinforced. This resistance was not mere stubbornness, it was survival. Human beings need order, need boundaries, need meaning. The firmament was not only a scientific model, it was the psychological scaffolding that allowed early civilizations to thrive. Without it, the world threatened to collapse into chaos. But cracks continued to widen. Comets, streaking unpredictably across the sky, pierced the illusion of fixed stars embedded in crystal. Eclipses, though mapped, still carried terror, as if the dome could momentarily fail, plunging the world into darkness. The refusal of the call grew harder to sustain, yet still, humanity clung to the dome. The resistance grew fiercest when individuals dared to speak against it. Philosophers who hinted at infinity were marginalized, their writings preserved only in fragments. Heraclitus mused that the cosmos was eternal fire, not a dome at all, but his vision was drowned by Aristotle's order. Those who doubted were silenced by the weight of tradition, and yet, beneath the refusal, questions persisted. If the firmament was perfect, why did the heavens sometimes seem unstable? If the dome was eternal, why did stars rise and set? Why did planets wander? The tension between observation and belief gnawed at the edges of certainty. Still, cultures doubled down. The firmament became dogma. Priests, kings, philosophers all reinforced its authority. To doubt the dome was to doubt everything, and so the call to adventure, to push beyond the firmament, was resisted with all the force civilization could muster. But resistance is never permanent. The call always finds a way. A telescope would one day pierce the vault. New models would one day shatter its perfection. But in these early centuries, humanity hesitated, unwilling to let go of the sky that had sheltered them for so long. The refusal of the call was inevitable. To abandon the firmament meant abandoning security, tradition, meaning itself. And so humanity held fast, resisting the cracks that grew wider with each passing century. But resistance cannot hold forever. Eventually, the pressure would break the dome. For now, the firmament stood, defended fiercely against doubt. But whispers of challenge grew louder. The stage was set for a mentor to arise, a figure who would reinterpret the dome, guiding humanity deeper into mystery. The refusal had delayed the journey, but it could not stop it. The firmament endured, but the adventure was only beginning. Every journey needs a guide. When uncertainty grows, when cracks spread across the ceiling of belief, people search for someone, or something, to restore confidence, to make sense of chaos. For the firmament, that mentor came not as a single figure, but as a text, a scripture, a cosmology inscribed in words so powerful that they shaped the imagination of civilizations for millennia. The Hebrew Bible preserved and reinterpreted the ancient vision of the firmament. Where Mesopotamian myths had spoken of Marduk splitting the body of a primordial sea monster to create the heavens, Genesis gave us something starker, more elegant, and God said, "Let there be a firmament in the midst of the waters, and let it divide the waters from the waters." Here the cosmos begins with division, above and below, waters separated by a dome, order carved out of chaos, stability imposed upon formlessness. The firmament, or rakia in Hebrew, is not metaphor. It is described as something beaten out, like metal hammered by a smith. A solid dome stretched overhead, holding back the cosmic ocean, the waters above. Beneath it lies the earth and the waters below. The dome does not merely protect, it sustains the very balance of creation. This vision carried profound implications. The firmament was not just architecture, it was theology. It was proof that the universe had structure, intention, order. It declared that chaos was subdued and that humanity lived within a cosmos that was purposeful and intelligible. Where other cultures feared the dome might fail, Genesis proclaimed it was God himself who upheld it. The firmament became a cosmic covenant, a sealing guaranteed by divine will. Yet this mentor did not speak in abstractions alone. It offered vivid images, the windows of heaven. In the story of the Great Flood, these windows are thrown open, and the waters above crash down upon the world. Rain was not simply natural, it was cosmic rupture, the dome itself releasing its burden. The firmament was not invulnerable. It could be opened, shattered, weaponized by the divine. And so its solidity was both comforting and terrifying. For the Hebrews, the firmament also regulated time and ritual. The stars and sun, embedded within its expanse, were appointed for signs and for seasons, for days and years. To gaze at the dome was to track sacred cycles, Sabbaths, festivals, harvests. The firmament was both clock and calendar, anchoring life to celestial rhythms. Here the mentor's role crystallizes. The firmament was no longer just myth or observation. It became instruction, a cosmic framework to guide life and meaning. Its imagery seeped into poetry and prophecy. The Psalms sang, "The heavens declare the glory of God, the firmament shows his handiwork." Prophets thundered of stars falling from heaven, of the vault shaking in judgment. The firmament was woven into the imagination so tightly that to question it was to question divine authority itself. This biblical cosmos also became fertile soil for later interpreters. Early Jewish and Christian thinkers elaborated on the firmament, picturing it as crystalline spheres layered one atop another, the dwelling place of angels and the realm of divine light. The dome was no longer a single expanse, but a hierarchy, a ladder between earth and heaven. Its solidity made it tangible, its divinity made it sacred. And yet, the mentor's guidance was not without shadows, for in making the firmament divine, it also made it absolute. The dome was not to be doubted, only revered. Alternative visions, the infinite cosmos of some Greek philosophers, the radical speculations of heretics, were marginalized, silenced. The mentor provided structure, but it also enforced boundaries. To step beyond the dome was to risk blasphemy. Still, the firmament as described in Scripture was more than control. It was imagination. It offered humanity a way to make sense of the heavens, to transform terror into meaning. It gave purpose to the stars, rhythm to the moon, narrative to catastrophe. Without such guidance, the cosmos risked collapsing into chaos once again. But every mentor must eventually be surpassed. For while the biblical cosmos held sway for centuries, its solidity would one day come into question. Comets would pierce its perfection, telescopes would shatter its crystalline shells, and the infinite void would beckon beyond. Yet even then, the mentor's voice would echo. Even as science dismantled the dome, the imagery of firmament, heavens above, windows of heaven, stars falling, would linger, refusing to fade. This is the paradox of the mentor's role. It prepares the seeker, but it also constrains them. The firmament as Scripture offered humanity stability, guidance, and meaning. But it also hardened into dogma, resisting change, resisting discovery. The dome was both gift and shackle. And so the seeker, humanity itself, faced a choice. To remain under the dome, guided by the mentor's hand, or to press further, to risk chaos, to confront the possibility that the firmament might not be real. This tension would define centuries of thought, a battle between tradition and observation, between theology and curiosity. Yet before that battle erupted, the mentor's vision would spread. Across Europe and the Middle East, the biblical firmament merged with Greek philosophy to form a powerful synthesis. The universe of spheres, each crystalline layer turning with perfect precision, the firmament as the outer boundary holding the stars. This model would dominate for over 1,000 years, and it was Scripture that gave it legitimacy, the mentor's voice echoing through the halls of medieval thought. The firmament, then, was not merely an ancient myth. It became the foundation of cosmology, theology, and culture. It was the mentor that guided humanity's imagination for centuries, offering not just order but meaning. But every guide must eventually be tested. And as humanity's tools grew sharper, as observation became more precise, the firmament's perfection would falter. The mentor's authority would be challenged. The dome would begin to crack. Still, in this moment of the story, the firmament stands unshaken, divine and absolute. Its solidity offers comfort, its windows offer terror, its stars offer rhythm. The mentor has spoken. The dome is the cosmos. The adventure continues. But as with all mentors, the question lingers. What happens when the teacher can no longer contain the student? The firmament had once been simple, a hammered dome stretched above the earth, a ceiling of creation dividing waters above from waters below. But as Greek philosophy merged with Scripture, the dome transformed. It expanded. It multiplied. It became not one sphere, but many. The cosmos was no longer a single vault. It was a vast machine of nested spheres, each turning with perfect harmony. This was the Ptolemaic system, the universe of spheres. At its heart, the Earth remained immovable, a fixed stage for human drama. Around it rotated concentric shells, each carrying its cargo of celestial lights. The moon on the innermost sphere, then Mercury, Venus, the Sun, Mars, Jupiter, Saturn, the 7 wandering stars, their paths inscribed on crystalline surfaces. Beyond them lay the firmament proper, the sphere of the fixed stars, glittering with eternal constellations. Beyond even that was the primum mobile, the first mover. imparting motion to all the rest, and outside it all, the dwelling of the divine, heaven, eternity, the realm beyond. This system was dazzling in its symmetry. It explained the motions of the heavens with order and beauty. Planets no longer wandered aimlessly across the dome. Their strange retrograde paths were accounted for with epicycles, smaller circles riding on larger ones. To medieval eyes, this was not complication but elegance, a music of spheres, a cosmic harmony echoing the perfection of its creator. The firmament had crossed the threshold. No longer a hammered plate of metal, it had become an intricate architecture of crystal, a cathedral of geometry encasing the world. Angels were imagined to push the spheres, divine hands turning them in endless rhythm. Each level of heaven was both physical and spiritual, a mechanism of astronomy and a hierarchy of meaning. But in this elegance lay a new fragility. The dome had multiplied into many domes, each interdependent, each more complex than the last. The firmament was now less a solid shield than a delicate clockwork. It explained much, but it also demanded increasing complexity to keep its perfection intact. Every new observation required new epicycles, new adjustments, new mathematical contrivances to maintain the illusion of flawless order. The threshold had been crossed, and beyond it lay cracks waiting to spread. And yet for over 1,000 years this system reigned unchallenged. From Ptolemy in Alexandria to Aquinas in medieval Europe, the universe of spheres became doctrine, merging philosophy, theology, and science into a single vision. Cathedrals were built as reflections of it, stained glass windows mapping the heavens, architecture echoing celestial order. To live on Earth was to live at the center of a cosmic machine, surrounded by perfection, encased in meaning. The firmament was not merely a ceiling, it was an entire hierarchy of being. This system comforted. It placed humanity at the center of everything, embraced by spheres of light and music. It offered certainty. The heavens were eternal, unchanging, incorruptible. Comets and novae, when they appeared, were dismissed as atmospheric illusions, for the heavens themselves could not alter. The spheres were divine, their perfection beyond doubt. To live under them was to be sheltered by the most exquisite architecture imaginable. But the cracks were forming. Observers noticed irregularities that the system struggled to explain. Planets did not move as smoothly as the models predicted. Eclipses, while mapped, revealed discrepancies. Comets tore across the sky, defying the crystalline shells that were supposed to encase the stars. Each anomaly forced new corrections, new epicycles, new elaborations. The music of the spheres became more complex, more strained. And beyond the cracks lay something more dangerous: imagination. What if the spheres were not real? What if the heavens were not perfect? What if the firmament was not eternal? These whispers remained faint, silenced by tradition and authority, but they lingered. The threshold had been crossed. The dome had expanded into grandeur, but its grandeur was vulnerable. The medieval mind embraced this universe not only as science, but as theology. The spheres were reflections of divine order. The firmament was not just crystal, but covenant. To doubt it was to risk heresy. And so resistance held even as contradictions grew. The Cathedral of Spheres stood tall, shining, magnificent, but its foundations were beginning to shake, for in its very beauty lay its weakness. The system was too perfect, too rigid, too absolute. It could not bend to new observations without distorting itself into knots of complexity. And the more precise humanity's measurements became, the more fragile the spheres appeared. Crossing the threshold had given humanity a cosmos of order and meaning, but it had also locked us into a model that could not last. The firmament was now crystalline, elegant, sacred. But cracks spread silently across its surface, waiting for the moment when the weight of evidence would bring the dome crashing down. For now, though, the universe of spheres still sheltered humanity. Its music still played, its perfection still dazzled, and in its grandeur, people found meaning, identity, and awe. The firmament had evolved, had crossed into something greater, but the journey was far from over, because thresholds are not destinations, they are passages, and beyond this one lay ordeal, for when the cracks grew wide enough, when observation grew sharp enough, when courage grew strong enough, the dome would not endure. The universe of spheres was magnificent, but magnificence is fragile, and its collapse would change everything. The universe of spheres was dazzling. To medieval eyes, it explained everything: the rising and setting of the stars, the wandering of planets, the cycle of seasons. It merged faith and reason into a single cosmic cathedral, each crystalline layer turning in harmony with divine will. But no matter how magnificent, every structure must endure tests, and the firmament was no exception. The first tests came from those who were, paradoxically, its greatest allies, astronomers who measured the heavens with increasing precision. These were not heretics or rebels. They were believers, mathematicians, priests, scholars who sought to strengthen the model, not shatter it. Yet their very dedication to accuracy placed strain upon the spheres. In the Islamic world, scholars like al-Battani, al-Hazen, and Averroes inherited the Ptolemaic system and refined it with brilliance. They charted the heavens with instruments far more advanced than those of ancient Greece, observing planetary motions with meticulous care. Their aim was not to overthrow the crystalline cosmos, but to perfect it. Yet perfection proved elusive. Al-Hazen, studying optics and vision, questioned how light could pass through solid celestial spheres. If the heavens were crystalline, how did the stars shine through? Was the firmament truly a physical shell, or was it something else, something less tangible? His questions did not topple the dome, but they cracked its solidity. Meanwhile, astronomers like Nasir al-Din al-Tusi developed ingenious mathematical models, such as the famous Tusi couple, to account for planetary motion without abandoning geocentrism. These refinements made the system more accurate, but also more complex. Each new correction strained the elegance of the spheres, piling epicycles upon epicycles until the music of the heavens risked collapsing into noise. In Christian Europe, scholastics like Thomas Aquinas defended the spheres with theological vigor. To them, the crystalline heavens were not only physical, but moral, incorruptible, perfect, eternal, in contrast to the corruptible and transient world below. The firmament became a boundary between imperfection and divinity. To deny it was to deny cosmic order itself. Aquinas did not question the dome, he enshrined it. But observation is a stubborn ally. Even those loyal to tradition could not ignore the heavens. Comets streaked unpredictably across the sky, seemingly cutting through the spheres that were supposed to encase the stars. Were they atmospheric phenomena, as some insisted? Or were they celestial visitors, tearing holes in the dome? The question lingered, uncomfortable, unresolved. Then came the nova of 1572, a new star blazing into existence where none had been before. According to Aristotelian cosmology, the heavens were incorruptible. Nothing new could appear in the firmament of fixed stars. Yet here was a luminous intruder, undeniable, recorded across Europe by none other than Tycho Brahe. The dome was supposed to be eternal, unchanging, and yet it changed. Tycho became one of the firmament's strangest allies. A devout observer, he resisted Copernicus's heliocentric model, insisting that Earth remained the center of creation. Yet his own meticulous measurements contradicted the crystalline spheres. Comets, he found, moved freely through the supposed shells, traveling across regions where solid domes should have barred their way. Tycho clung to geocentrism, but the firmament's solidity was shattered by his own data. The allies of the dome were testing it more harshly than its enemies ever could. Their loyalty, their precision, their devotion to truth forced them to confront contradictions. They did not set out to dismantle the firmament, they sought to preserve it. but in their hands the dome began to crumble. And still, the firmament's defenders resisted. Theologians argued that the spheres were not material, but spiritual. The dome was not glass, but order itself, an abstract boundary of divine authority. Others insisted the anomalies were illusions, tricks of perspective, failures of instruments. The heavens could not be corrupted, for they were the dwelling place of God. Better to mistrust one's own eyes than to mistrust the dome. Yet the tests multiplied. Eclipses recorded with growing accuracy revealed subtle deviations from predicted paths. Planetary alignments betrayed inconsistencies in the epicycle-laden models. Each attempt to preserve the crystalline architecture required further elaboration, further complexity, further strain. The more the firmament was defended, the more fragile it appeared. This was the paradox of the Allies. Their devotion both preserved and doomed the dome. Without them, the firmament might have collapsed centuries earlier. But because of them, it endured long enough to be tested to breaking point. The more precise the measurements, the more undeniable the cracks. And so the firmament endured its trial by observation. It was not yet broken. It was still defended with zeal. Cathedrals still mirrored its order. Stained glass still glowed with its geometry. Theologians still extolled its perfection. But beneath the surface, beneath the beauty, cracks widened. The firmament had faced its first great test, and though it survived, it did so wounded. Its allies had unwittingly become its critics, and its greatest defenders had sown the seeds of its destruction. The dome was no longer a hammered plate of divine bronze, no longer a crystalline cathedral unshaken by time. It was an architecture under stress, a fragile clockwork strained by contradictions. The firmament still stood, but its foundations trembled. The stage was set for the next ordeal, the approach of a threshold that would tear the dome apart. The telescope was waiting, the heliocentric challenge looming, the courage to doubt growing. The firmament had endured its tests, its allies had prolonged its reign, but the cracks could not be sealed forever. The dome would break. And when it did, the cosmos would change forever. The firmament had survived centuries of tests. It had weathered comets, novae, and the uneasy murmurs of astronomers who knew the sky too well to ignore its contradictions. But now, a darker cave loomed ahead, a challenge that did not merely question the solidity of the spheres, but the very place of Earth within them. The heliocentric model, first whispered in antiquity, now returned with the force of revelation. And once spoken, it could not be unheard. Nicholas Copernicus was not a revolutionary by temperament. A canon of the Church, he lived a life of relative seclusion, working quietly in his study, not in the glare of heretical trial, but in the shadow of tradition. And yet, when he published De Revolutionibus Orbium Coelestium in 1543, he crossed a threshold that would echo through the ages. At its heart was a single, audacious claim. Earth was not the center of the cosmos. The planets, including Earth, circled the sun. The firmament of fixed stars was not the dome of heaven, but the faraway boundary of an unimaginable sphere. The crystalline shells that had defined the heavens for 2,000 years were unnecessary. The dome, it seemed, was an illusion. Copernicus did not wield his model as a weapon. He presented it cautiously, even tentatively, framing it as a mathematical convenience rather than a literal truth. Yet the implications were explosive. If Earth moved, the entire architecture of spheres shifted. The firmament was no longer a fixed ceiling above us, but a receding mystery beyond comprehension. Theologians bristled, but mathematicians paid attention. The Copernican model explained retrograde motion more elegantly than epicycles stacked upon epicycles. It simplified celestial mechanics, peeling away centuries of patchwork. To some, it was beautiful, a symmetry too graceful to ignore. To others, it was blasphemy. The firmament, once a dome of certainty, now seemed porous. If Earth itself was in motion, then what of the heavens? Were the stars truly embedded in crystalline shells? Or were they scattered across infinite space, unbounded, unreachable, terrifying in their immensity? Galileo Galilei brought the next assault, not with theory, but with vision. In 1609, he raised a telescope to the sky and peered into the unknown. What he saw shattered the firmament's dignity. The moon, once assumed to be a perfect polished orb of divine light, revealed scars, mountains, valleys, craters, imperfection in the heavens. The firmament's incorruptibility was a lie. Then Jupiter's moons circling their giant host. If other worlds had satellites, then Earth's moon was not unique, nor was Earth itself central. The heavens did not revolve around us. The dome cracked further, and then, perhaps most devastating of all, Galileo turned his lens upon the Milky Way. What had appeared as a soft band of heavenly glow dissolved into countless stars, layered upon stars, stretching into unimaginable depths. If the firmament was a fixed dome of lights, Galileo had seen it splinter into infinity. Theologians recoiled. If the firmament was not a boundary, then where was heaven? If the dome was not crystalline, then where did angels tread? Galileo's discoveries did not simply challenge astronomy. They undermined theology, metaphor, and meaning. The firmament was not just a scientific model, it was a cosmic stage upon which human purpose had been written. Without it, the script faltered. Johannes Kepler deepened the crisis with his mathematical precision. Building upon Tycho Brahe's painstaking data, he abandoned circular orbits for ellipses, stripping away the last elegance of crystalline spheres. The planets did not ride within glass shells. They moved freely, governed by laws that hinted at hidden forces, a precursor to Newton's gravity. Kepler's vision was strange, mystical, mathematical, and revolutionary. He saw the cosmos not as a layered dome, but as a harmonious machine, bound by ratios and geometry, infused with divine order, yet stripped of its old architecture. The firmament dissolved into laws of motion, the crystalline spheres evaporating into equations. For defenders of the dome, this was the inmost cave, the darkest ordeal. The firmament had been not just a scientific model, but a cosmological sanctuary, a place where human beings understood their relationship to the divine. The heavens were perfect, eternal, fixed, and so too, by implication, was God's order. But if the heavens shifted, decayed, expanded without bound, what then of certainty? What then of God's dwelling place? The heliocentric threat was not only observational, it was existential. If Earth was not the center, humanity's privileged position was cast into doubt. The firmament had told us we were central, cherished, placed beneath heaven's dome. Now the dome dissolved, and the infinite stretched above. Was humanity adrift in endless darkness, insignificant specks orbiting a star among stars? Or was this new vastness an even greater stage for divine creation? The clash came to a head in 1616 when the Catholic Church formally declared heliocentrism formally heretical. Copernicus's book was placed on the index of forbidden works, and Galileo was ordered not to teach or defend the sun-centered system. The dome might be cracking, but its defenders still wielded power. The firmament had become not just a scientific question, but a battlefield of faith and authority. Galileo defied them. With his dialogue concerning the two chief world systems, he championed heliocentrism with wit, logic, and evidence. But his defiance brought him before the Inquisition, condemned to house arrest for the rest of his life. The firmament had not yet fallen. It still cast a long shadow. And yet, even under censure, the heliocentric vision spread. The telescope's revelations could not be unseen, the data could not be unmeasured. The firmament had been entered, its innermost cave approached, and within its darkness the truth emerged. The dome was an illusion. The ordeal was not yet over. Newton's laws would soon explain the motions with irresistible clarity, collapsing the spheres entirely into a universal gravitation. But already the firmament's power was fading. The approach to the inmost cave was complete. Humanity had crossed the threshold into a universe without ceilings, without crystalline shells, without certainty. The dome had promised order. The heliocentric threat offered freedom, but at the price of security. And so the question lingered, hanging like a comet in the night. If the firmament could fall, what else in our cosmos is destined to collapse beneath the weight of observation? The dome was gone. The crystalline spheres shattered, not with the sound of glass, but with the silence of a truth too vast to contain. When Newton set his quill to paper and wrote Principia Mathematica in 1687, he did more than describe planetary motion. He stripped the heavens of their architecture. The planets no longer rode within divine shells, but moved in obedience to an invisible force, gravity, pulling every mass toward every other. The firmament, once the grand ceiling of creation, was reduced to absence. No longer a solid boundary, no longer a shelter. Above us stretched infinity, an endless void, dark, cold, and mercilessly indifferent. Humanity had crossed into its ordeal. For centuries, the firmament had offered not just structure but comfort. It assured us that the cosmos was finite, that the stars were lanterns hung upon a roof, that heaven lay just beyond the dome. The firmament framed human life with purpose, placing us in a cosmos that was ordered, enclosed, knowable. Its collapse was not merely a scientific revelation, it was an existential wound. Infinity is intoxicating to the intellect but crushing to the spirit. To imagine a universe without edges, without a ceiling, was to face the possibility of insignificance. Where once humanity had been central, embraced by heaven's dome, now we drifted through endless space, a rock orbiting an ordinary star among countless others. The ordeal was not only knowledge, it was dread. Theologians scrambled to adapt. If the firmament was gone, where then was heaven? Was paradise beyond the reach of telescopes, in some dimension untouched by gravity and light? Or had we mistaken metaphor for reality all along? Some clung to the vestiges of the dome, insisting the firmament must be invisible, a spiritual veil. Others embraced the new order, declaring that God's majesty was revealed not in finite ceilings, but in infinite expanse. Yet the shift was seismic. For the first time, humanity confronted the universe without shelter. The firmament's death had left us naked before the void. Poets captured the terror in ways equations could not. Blaise Pascal confessed his horror at the eternal silence of these infinite spaces. The words strike like a blade, for they echo the dread that followed the firmament's fall. The dome had sung of order, infinity whispered of silence. And yet alongside dread, there was wonder. For if the cosmos was infinite, then possibilities were boundless. The stars were not points of light fixed to a crystalline shell, but suns in their own right, perhaps with worlds circling them. The universe expanded, not just in size but in imagination. The ordeal was double-edged, awe entwined with fear, wonder laced with despair. But the ordeal was not easily borne. Without the firmament, humanity risked drifting not only through space, but through meaning. Were we still special? Or had the fall of the dome revealed us as mere accidents of cosmic mechanics? The firmament had framed us as central actors in a divine drama. Infinity threatened to render us extras in a play too vast to notice our existence. The cultural shock was profound. Medieval cathedrals, once modeled on the heavens with domes echoing the cosmic ceiling, now seemed quaint relics of a vanished cosmology. Artists, philosophers, and theologians grappled with how to live in a universe without boundaries. The ordeal was as much cultural as it was scientific, and yet humanity endured. In the ashes of the firmament, new visions arose. If infinity was terrifying, it was also liberating. No dome meant no prison. The universe was open, dynamic, governed by laws that could be studied, mastered, harnessed. Newton's gravity did not restore the dome, but it gave the void a kind of order, an invisible web binding the infinite together. Still, the price was heavy. The heavens were no longer the dwelling place of gods or angels. They were empty space, vast distances, silent laws. Humanity had killed the firmament, but in doing so, had it also killed a piece of itself? The ordeal of infinity was not easily overcome. Even today, the dread lingers. Modern cosmology speaks of billions of galaxies, expanding universes, multiverses beyond even our own. The firmament was small, but it gave us a home. Infinity is grand, but it leaves us homeless. Did we gain more than we lost? Perhaps. We gained knowledge, freedom, possibility, but we lost certainty, intimacy, the sense of being sheltered beneath a sky that was made for us. We exchanged a dome for a void, a home for an abyss. The ordeal, then, is not finished. We still live with its consequences. Every telescope that peers deeper into the dark extends the void further, erasing any lingering traces of the dome. And with each discovery, the same question gnaws. Have we lost more than we gained by killing the firmament? The firmament had fallen, but in its ruins something astonishing rose. From the wreckage of spheres and domes, Newton built a cosmos of elegant laws, as precise as they were universal. Where once humanity had looked upward and seen stories, angels and gods, now it saw mathematics. And though the heavens were emptied of their crystalline shells, they had gained something equally wondrous: predictability. Gravity became the new architecture of the universe. The stars were no longer lanterns fixed upon a ceiling. They were suns, distant and blazing, suspended in infinite void by the same laws that pulled apples to earth. The firmament had promised order, but Newton delivered something greater: universality. The same force that bound planets in orbit guided tides and falling stones. Heaven and earth were no longer divided realms. They were one. This was the reward, the cosmos unveiled, stripped of myth but revealed in truth. Humanity had traded the intimacy of a dome for the grandeur of a universe without edges. It was a victory for knowledge, a triumph of reason over tradition. The firmament was gone, but the stars had never been closer. And yet, the price of this reward was steep. The dome had given us meaning. Newton's cosmos, though elegant, was indifferent. It did not speak of purpose, only of law. It did not comfort, only explained. The heavens, once alive with angels and divine music, now stretched silent, mechanical, inexorable. For some, this was liberation. For others, it was exile. The telescope continued to strip away the last vestiges of the dome. Stars, once fixed in a crystalline shell, proved to be scattered across inconceivable distances. Nebulae, once thought to be faint clouds within the firmament, revealed themselves as entire galaxies, each with billions of suns. The cosmos unveiled itself as vaster and more complex than even Copernicus had dared to dream. Knowledge advanced in leaps. Halley predicted the return of his comet. Newton's laws guided ships across oceans and explained the tides. Humanity, once enclosed by a dome, now wielded the cosmos itself as a map. The heavens became a realm not of mystery alone, but of mastery. Still, beneath the triumph, a subtle ache remained. The intimacy of the firmament was gone. The stars no longer spoke in myth. They burned as indifferent furnaces. Heaven was no longer just beyond the dome. It was nowhere to be found. The reward of knowledge came with the loss of home. But myths do not die so easily. Even as Newton's universe took hold, the old stories endured. The firmament lived on in scripture, in art, in the domes of cathedrals. It lingered in language. We still speak of the heavens above, still draw meaning from the sky. For though the cosmos was unveiled, humanity remained hungry for story, for metaphor, for something more than law. Perhaps this is the deeper truth of the reward. Knowledge stripped away the dome, but it could not strip away the human need for meaning. The firmament, though gone, endured in imagination. Myths adapted, transformed, reappeared in new guises. The dome was replaced by infinity, yet the desire for a ceiling, a structure, a shelter remained. Why? Why do myths endure, even when knowledge makes them obsolete? Perhaps because they give us what science cannot: intimacy. The laws of physics can tell us how stars burn, but not why we find ourselves compelled to gaze at them in wonder. Equations can predict orbits, but they cannot soothe the dread of infinity. The firmament, as myth, survives because it offers something deeper than explanation. It offers meaning. And so humanity found itself in a paradox. The dome was gone, the cosmos unveiled. The reward was knowledge, clarity, freedom. But the hunger for myth persisted, haunting the edges of reason. Science explained the heavens. Myth made them human. Together they built a strange equilibrium. In the centuries that followed, this equilibrium would wobble, shift, and strain. The Enlightenment leaned toward reason, dismissing myth as superstition. Romanticism swung back, infusing the infinite void with poetry and longing. Even now, in an age of satellites and quantum physics, myths of domes, firmaments, and heavens endure. They persist not because they are true in a scientific sense, but because they are true in a human sense. The cosmos unveiled is vast, dazzling, merciless, but the firmament reminds us that we still crave shelter, still long for the intimacy of a sky that belongs to us, and so the reward is double-edged. Knowledge unveils, myth endures. The dome has fallen, but in its absence the stars shine brighter than ever. Yet one question remains, gnawing at the edge of triumph. If myths endure despite knowledge, what does that reveal about us? Do we cling to illusion out of weakness, or do myths contain a truth that knowledge alone cannot touch? The cosmos has been unveiled, but the story is not finished. For in every myth that refuses to die, the firmament whispers still. Cliffhanger. If myths endure, why? The firmament may have collapsed under the weight of telescopes and mathematics, but its memory has proven astonishingly resilient. Across cultures, continents, and millennia, the image of a dome above, a sky that is not endless void but structured boundary, recurs with uncanny persistence. It is as though humanity, even in its most distant branches, could not let go of the notion of a cosmic ceiling. The biblical firmament is only the most famous example, but it is not alone. In the Norse sagas, creation itself begins with the slaying of the giant Ymir. His body becomes the raw material of the cosmos. Flesh becomes earth, blood becomes sea, bones become mountains. And his skull, vast curved enclosing, becomes the dome of the sky. Beneath it, the stars were set like sparks, hammered into the vault by the gods. The firmament in this myth is not crystalline but bone, not abstract but visceral. Yet the image is the same. The sky as structure, a lid enclosing the world. Travel further east, and Hindu cosmology offers another striking parallel. In the ancient Vedic texts, the universe is described as enclosed within a cosmic shell, an egg known as the Brahmanda, the egg of Brahma. This shell is multi-layered, vast beyond comprehension, but always enclosing. The cosmos is not infinite and unbounded, but wrapped, contained, structured, the firmament by another name. Even in the traditions of the Hopi, a Native American people far from the reach of Mediterranean or Indian cosmologies, we find echoes of the same imagery. The Hopi speak of a layered sky, worlds above worlds, stacked in vertical order. The dome is not singular, but plural, with each layer forming a boundary between realms. The firmament here is not one ceiling, but many, each a threshold between worlds. The recurrence is striking. From the ice of Scandinavia to the deserts of North America, from the Vedic plains of India to the biblical lands of Mesopotamia, humanity again and again imagines the sky not as endless, but as bounded. Not infinite, but domed. Why? Is this simply coincidence, the convergence of imagination upon the same comforting shape? Or does it reveal something deeper, an archetype buried in the human psyche, perhaps rooted in the very structure of perception? For the sky, seen with unaided eyes, does curve above us. The horizon does wrap us in a circle. The dome of the firmament may be illusion, but it is an illusion carved into experience itself. And yet, there is another possibility, one more haunting. Myths endure not merely because they comfort, but because they preserve memory. Could these recurring domes be fragments of a shared memory, echoing some ancient understanding now lost? Were the stories of Ymir's skull, the Brahmanda, the Hopi sky layers, and the biblical firmament not simply poetic inventions, but distorted echoes of a cosmic truth glimpsed long ago? The road back leads us here, into the realm of archetype, myth, and memory. We left the firmament behind in the age of Newton, but we find it waiting for us in the most unexpected places, in story, in ritual, in the stubborn persistence of language. Even modern speech betrays its survival. We speak of the sky above as though it were a surface. We call heaven up as though direction still mattered beyond atmosphere. The dome lingers in thought even when banished from science. Carl Jung argued that certain images are not invented but inherited, embedded in the collective unconscious of humanity. The dome, the cosmic ceiling, may be such an archetype. Its recurrence across cultures hints at something more primal than doctrine. The firmament may no longer be science, but it may be psychology, a truth about the human need to enclose, to boundary, to shelter. And yet myths often carry dual lives. They are psychological symbols, yes, but they are also echoes of forgotten knowledge. Archaeologists have long debated whether flood myths around the world point to memories of the Ice Age melt, preserved across millennia. Could cosmological myths too preserve some ancestral memory of the sky, not as void, but as structure? Perhaps even a real event, cosmic in scale, that left its imprint on imagination. The Norse spoke of sparks set into Ymir's skull, the Vedas of stars embedded in the cosmic shell, the Bible of light set in the firmament. Again and again the same pattern, stars not as infinite scatter but as fixed lights upon a dome. To ancient eyes this was not merely plausible, it was obvious. The sky looked curved, the stars seemed embedded, and so the dome became truth enshrined across cultures. But what is remarkable is not that cultures invented domes, but that they kept them. Long after new explanations arose, myths endured. They adapted, reinterpreted, reappeared. The firmament's persistence suggests it fills a role knowledge cannot. It bridges the gap between explanation and meaning, between what the sky is and what the sky means. As humanity walks the road back, it must confront this paradox. The dome has been killed by science, but it is reborn in story. Myths persist, not because they are fact, but because they satisfy a hunger knowledge leaves unmet. The firmament in all its guises, skull, shell, layered sky, biblical dome, reveals something fundamental about us. We are not content with infinity. We long for enclosure. And so the question rises, subtle but insistent. Are myths global memory of a cosmic truth? Or are they mirrors of our own minds, reflecting our need for shelter against the abyss? The dome had fallen, or so we believed. Newton, Galileo, and Copernicus had shattered its crystalline ceiling, scattering its fragments into the endless void. The firmament was dismissed to the realm of myth, remembered only in scripture and poetry, lingering in domes of churches and whispered in ancient tongues. And yet, centuries later, in the age of modern science, the firmament returned, not as myth, but as physics. Not as a skull or shell, but as horizons, fields, and boundaries written into the very structure of reality. The firmament, it seemed, had never truly died. It had transformed, Consider the speed of light. Nothing in the universe can outrun it. No signal, no messenger. This limit means that we can see only so far into space and time. The light that reaches us is finite, stretched across billions of years, carrying messages from stars long dead. Beyond a certain distance, light has not had time to arrive. The result is astonishing, a cosmic horizon. We stand at the center of an observable sphere, a dome of light enclosing us, its edge marked not by glass or bone, but by time itself. This is the first resurrection of the firmament, the cosmic microwave background. Discovered in 1964 by Arno Penzias and Robert Wilson, it is the faint afterglow of the Big Bang, stretched across the sky as a perfect dome of radiation. Everywhere we look, in every direction, we see the same background hum, the same relic of creation. It is as though the universe itself is wrapped in a faint invisible shell, a boundary that whispers of beginnings. The firmament, reborn as cosmic echo. But this is only the beginning. General relativity, Einstein's grand reimagining of space and time, bends the very notion of infinity. Space is not endless in the way Newton imagined. It is curved, shaped by mass and energy. The universe itself may be finite yet unbounded, like the surface of a sphere. Look far enough in one direction, and you might return to where you began. The dome of the firmament, once shattered, reappears here as geometry. The universe itself could be its own ceiling. Black holes provide another eerie resurrection. At their heart lies the event horizon, a boundary from which no light can escape. To an outside observer, this horizon is a kind of personal firmament, a surface beyond which reality is hidden. The event horizon is not solid, but it behaves like a dome, sealing off knowledge, enclosing secrets. What lies beyond it is invisible, unknowable, as forbidden as the heavens once were. Quantum physics deepens the revival. The quantum vacuum, far from being empty, seethes with particles appearing and vanishing, a restless ocean of energy. Yet even here, boundaries emerge. In quantum field theory, horizons are not just astrophysical but fundamental. Observers in accelerated motion experience their own event horizons, limits to what they can know. Reality itself, it seems, is structured by boundaries, domes of perception that echo the ancient firmament. And then there is the universe's ultimate fate. Cosmologists now speak of the cosmic horizon imposed by dark energy, the mysterious force accelerating the expansion of space. Galaxies beyond a certain distance recede faster than light, slipping forever beyond view. The cosmos is slowly erecting a new dome, a horizon of darkness, beyond which nothing can ever reach us. Our descendants will live under this invisible ceiling, stars winking out one by one until the night sky empties. The firmament resurrects, not as shelter, but as prison. This is the irony. Science, which killed the dome, has recreated it, not as myth, but as physics. Everywhere we turn, the cosmos presents boundaries, horizons, enclosures. They are not crystalline shells, yet they serve the same role, defining the limits of our world. The firmament, once thought banished, persists in new guises. Even language reflects this return. Astronomers speak of cosmic horizons, last scattering surfaces, event horizons. The terms themselves betray the imagery of domes and ceilings. Scientists may no longer believe in Ymir's skull or the biblical firmament, but their equations describe structures that function in remarkably similar ways. Perhaps this is inevitable, for what is the firmament but a recognition that human perception is bounded, that there is always a limit beyond which we cannot see? The ancients named it a dome, a shell, a roof. We name it a horizon, a background, a boundary. Different terms, same truth. Reality always comes with edges. The resurrection of the firmament does not comfort as the old dome once did. It does not promise heaven above, nor intimacy with the divine. Instead, it humbles. reminding us that no matter how powerful our instruments, we will always live beneath horizons we cannot pierce. The firmament, reborn, does not shelter us, it restrains us. It whispers that our knowledge is finite, our reach limited, our place enclosed once more. And yet, there is a strange familiarity in this. The ancients imagined themselves under a dome because they saw one. Modern science tells us we are enclosed within horizons because we measure them. Across time, across paradigms, the message is the same. There are limits. The dome is eternal, not in structure, but in principle. This is the resurrection, the firmament transformed into physics, returning not as myth, but as law. The dome survives because the universe itself insists upon boundaries. And so, having torn down the old firmament, we find ourselves beneath new ones, event horizons, cosmic backgrounds, expanding limits. The dome is no longer a comfort, but a reminder, not a sanctuary, but a cage. And the question emerges with renewed urgency. If the firmament returns again and again in myth and in science alike, what truth is it trying to tell us? We began with bone and shell, with gods stretching skulls across the heavens, with light fixed in crystalline domes. We shattered those ceilings, and still we found them waiting for us in horizons and cosmic boundaries. The firmament refuses to die because in truth it is not only a structure of myth or of physics, it is also a structure of mind. To return with the elixir is to bring back not the dome itself, but the knowledge of why it persists. The firmament lives because we need it. It thrives because it answers questions science cannot erase. The dome endures because it is not only about what is above, but about what it means to live below. At its core, the firmament is metaphor, an image of shelter, of boundary, of order against chaos. The ancients lived beneath a ceiling not because they lacked science, but because they required meaning. The dome told them they were enclosed, held, given a place in the cosmos. Infinity is too vast to bear. The firmament softened the abyss into home. Today, we tell ourselves we have outgrown such illusions. We look at the sky and see not ceilings, but void. Yet the metaphor remains. We still build domes to house our sacred spaces, churches, mosques, observatories. We still curve our architecture upward into vaults and ceilings that echo the heavens. Even the planetarium, that modern temple of science, projects the universe upon a dome, mimicking the firmament it claims to have killed. What does this persistence reveal? That myths and metaphors cannot be erased by data. They adapt, they migrate, they take new forms. The firmament has become the metaphor for limitation itself. Every boundary in science, every horizon in physics becomes a kind of dome, not visible, not physical, but conceptual. Each one whispers the same truth. We cannot see all, cannot know all, cannot escape the enclosures of perception. This is the elixir the firmament returns to us: humility. For in our age of arrogance, of rockets and satellites, of telescopes peering to the edge of the observable universe, we risk believing we have transcended boundaries. The firmament reminds us that we have not. There will always be a dome above, not of glass, but of comprehension. Our ceilings are horizons of knowledge, retreating yet eternal. But the metaphor carries another gift as well: identity. Beneath the dome, humanity has always found itself. The firmament framed our stories, our gods, our sense of purpose. Its return in metaphor is a reminder that we still need frames, still need stories, still need ceilings to orient ourselves. Infinity may be truth, but infinity is unbearable. The dome, as symbol, gives us scale. It places us in relation to something larger, reminding us that we are not the measure of all things. Even in literature and art, the dome persists. Dante's Divine Comedy imagines concentric spheres of heaven and hell. Milton's Paradise Lost envisions a vault dividing heaven from chaos. In our modern age, science fiction builds domes across alien planets, protective shells against hostile skies. Again and again we return to the same image, humanity enclosed beneath a ceiling, struggling against it, defined by it. The firmament is no longer belief but metaphor, and metaphor can be as powerful as fact. Consider the way we still speak of the glass ceiling, a firmament of ambition, invisible yet absolute, or of breaking through boundaries, reaching the stars, shattering limits. Each phrase evokes the dome, the ceiling, the boundary above. We live in metaphors of firmament, even as we deny its existence. The elixir is not the dome's return as fact, but as symbol woven into our every thought. Even in science, metaphor lingers. When cosmologists describe the cosmic microwave background as a surface of last scattering, they frame it as a shell, a dome. When physicists describe event horizons, they speak of boundaries, edges, ceilings of reality. The firmament may no longer be crystalline, but its shadow lies over our language. To describe limits, we reach for domes. To describe the universe, we return to the firmament's image. And perhaps this is the ultimate lesson. The firmament was never about the sky. It was always about us. It was about our need to see ourselves framed, enclosed, structured. To return with the elixir is to realize that the dome persists because it mirrors the architecture of the mind. We think in ceilings, we imagine in boundaries, we conceive of meaning in frames. The elixir humbles us, but it also empowers us. For if we recognize the dome as metaphor, we can wield it. We can see where its comfort becomes prison, where its shelter becomes cage. Myths endure because they are useful, but usefulness must be interrogated. The firmament, as symbol, can either bind us to superstition or remind us of our hunger for order. The choice is ours. The dome persists across myth, religion, and science not because it is fact, but because it is archetype. Jung might have called it a collective inheritance. But whatever its origin, it tells us that humanity is not made for infinity. We shrink without boundaries, collapse without ceilings. The firmament, reborn as metaphor, is the elixir that prevents us from being lost in the void. And so, in this return, the firmament gives us back not itself, but our own reflection. It tells us that we are creatures who need domes, who draw lines across chaos, who enclose ourselves in stories to survive. The dome is gone, but it will never die. It is in us. And as we stand beneath the night sky, emptied of spheres yet filled with horizons, we may sense this truth. The stars do not need a ceiling, but we do. Are the myths of domes, shells, and firmaments illusions? Or are they memories of the deepest truth, that meaning itself requires a boundary? The firmament, reborn as metaphor and boundary in science, might have remained comfortably symbolic. But the story does not end with poetry and physics. The dome, even in the 21st century, continues to provoke argument, belief, and rebellion. It survives not only as metaphor but as battleground. For some it is scripture made literal. For others it is conspiracy reborn. For science it is a curiosity of culture. And for all, it is a trial of interpretation, a test of how humanity chooses to reconcile myth and truth. Nowhere is this more visible than in the resurgence of the Flat Earth movement. Long dismissed as medieval relic, Flat Earth belief has, in the past decade, re-emerged in online communities. Central to many of these interpretations is the firmament, a literal dome enclosing a flat plane of Earth, sealing humanity beneath like insects in a glass jar. For believers, the firmament is not metaphor, not poetry, but structure. It is the ceiling of reality, a boundary installed by a creator to separate humans from the heavens. The evidence marshaled is not scientific but rhetorical. Passages from Genesis, descriptions of domes in myth, misinterpretations of atmospheric optics. To the modern mind trained in astronomy, the claims may appear absurd, but to those who distrust science, the dome serves as a potent symbol. It is tangible, enclosing, meaningful, a rejection of infinity's dread. The firmament offers not only shelter but rebellion against modernity. This is the trial. the same dome that scientists reinterpret as metaphor, some embrace as fact. The firmament, even stripped from cosmology centuries ago, becomes a vessel into which longing, skepticism, and identity can be poured. But the firmament's endurance is not limited to fringe belief. Religious traditions continue to grapple with it. Some theologians interpret the dome as metaphor for divine order, insisting the biblical firmament was never meant to be literal. Others hold fast to its historic reality, arguing that rejecting the dome is to reject Scripture's authority. The debate is not merely scientific, it is existential. Does one read the heavens as metaphor or as blueprint? Modern science, meanwhile, responds in its own way. Astronomers and physicists see the firmament not as rival, but as echo, a sign of humanity's enduring need for boundary. They dissect the psychology of conspiracy, noting how the dome appeals to a longing for structure in a chaotic age. The firmament in this reading becomes cultural data, evidence not of the cosmos, but of ourselves. And yet even science is not immune to the firmament's imagery. The cosmic microwave background is often depicted as a surrounding shell. The last scattering surface is imagined as a sphere enclosing us in light. These descriptions are metaphorical, but the metaphor persists. Scientists know the universe is not literally a dome, but they find themselves describing it in dome-like terms nonetheless. The firmament's ghost haunts even the equations of cosmology. Interpretation then becomes trial by fire. Myths endure, science advances, belief adapts. But the dome persists, forcing humanity to choose how it will be read. Is it symbol? Is it memory? Is it deception? Each choice reflects not only on cosmology but on culture itself. The trials extend into art and literature as well. Filmmakers build domed worlds in stories like The Truman Show, where the dome becomes metaphor for control, illusion, imprisonment. Authors imagine enclosed biospheres, domes across alien planets, glass ceilings that echo the firmament's protective and oppressive duality. Each retelling becomes interpretation, each metaphor a trial of meaning. The dome refuses to leave, returning again and again as the image of enclosure. Why does the firmament provoke such persistence? Perhaps because it is more than myth. It is a mirror. For those who embrace science, the dome reveals the limits of perception. For those who distrust authority, it becomes proof of conspiracy. For the devout, it is Scripture's seal. For the poet, it is metaphor of shelter and meaning. For all, it is trial. And yet this trial is necessary. The firmament's endurance forces humanity to confront its deepest tensions: reason versus faith, science versus myth, infinity versus intimacy. Each interpretation tests us, demanding that we decide not only what the dome is, but what we need it to be. Even in an age of rockets piercing the stratosphere, satellites circling the globe, telescopes gazing to the edge of the observable universe, the firmament endures. We know there is no glass ceiling above, no crystalline shell, and yet we cannot let it go. The dome survives, not because it is fact, but because it satisfies hungers that facts cannot. This is the trial of interpretation: to live in an age of knowledge, yet still crave myth; to embrace infinity, yet still imagine domes; to accept truth, yet still yearn for meaning. And so the firmament persists, rising in scripture, in conspiracy, in art, in science's metaphors. The trials of interpretation do not weaken it, they strengthen it. For every denial there is a reinvention, for every collapse a resurrection. The dome cannot be killed, because it is not only structure, it is symbol, and symbols live longer than stars. The firmament survives its trials not by winning or losing, but by transforming. It is the dome of Ymir's skull, the shell of Brahma's egg, the crystalline spheres of medieval heavens, the conspiracy ceiling of flat earth, the horizon of modern cosmology. Each interpretation is a trial, each trial a rebirth. And so the question rises once more. If the firmament endures in myth, in science, in belief, what does this persistence mean? Is it illusion, stubborn and unyielding? Or is it revelation, a reminder that reality, no matter how infinite, will always be enclosed by the ceilings of our own minds? The journey through myth and science, belief and metaphor, trial and reinterpretation has brought us to a truth deeper than any dome of bone, shell or glass. The firmament is not just a structure, nor merely a relic of pre-scientific imagination. It is an archetype, a fundamental image inscribed into the human psyche, recurring across epochs and cultures because it expresses something elemental about what it means to be human. The ultimate boon is not the recovery of the firmament as fact. It is the recognition of the firmament as symbol, as archetype, as mirror of our enduring struggle to place ourselves within a cosmos that is both vast and indifferent. Why a dome? Why does the human mind, from Mesopotamia to Scandinavia, from the Hopi mesas to the cathedrals of Europe, envision the sky as a ceiling? Perhaps because the dome is the most natural structure of perception. When we look up, the horizon curves around us, the sky arches above. Our eyes, limited and bound to the earth, render infinity as enclosure. The dome is not only imagined, it is seen, carved into perception itself. But the firmament goes beyond perception. It embodies order. To enclose the sky is to tame it, to transform chaos into cosmos. Without the dome, the heavens are endless, terrifying, devoid of structure. With the dome, the heavens are patterned, knowable, meaningful. The archetype of the firmament gives humanity more than shelter. It gives us a stage upon which our myths can unfold, a theater in which gods can dwell, a ceiling beneath which human life can find significance. This is why the dome recurs again and again, even after being disproven. It is not only a memory of ancient cosmology, it is a necessity of the human mind. We cannot abide unboundedness. We require ceilings, even imaginary ones, to make existence bearable. And so the archetype surfaces in every age: the Norse skull, the Vedic shell, the biblical dome. Later, the domes of cathedrals and mosques, architecture that mirrors the heavens above. In each case, the dome is not merely decoration, it is invocation. To enter a domed space is to stand beneath the firmament, to reenact the ancient posture of humanity enclosed by heaven. Even now, we build planetariums as domes, projecting stars upon their curved surfaces as if to recreate the lost ceiling of the cosmos. The firmament, in its archetypal form, cannot be escaped. The boon of recognizing this archetype is profound. It explains why the firmament endures in conspiracy and religion alike. It reveals why science, despite its precision, cannot entirely abandon dome-like metaphors. It clarifies why myths of domes are not accidents, but inevitabilities. The dome is the shape of the human need for order. But there is more. The firmament also represents the boundary between known and unknown. It is the edge of perception, the place where knowledge halts and mystery begins. Beneath the dome, humanity feels secure, but above it lies the realm of gods, chaos, infinity. The dome thus symbolizes not only shelter but limit. It tells us where our world ends, where our knowledge fails, where awe begins. This dual role, shelter and limit, explains its persistence. The firmament is not only comfort, it is humility. In psychology, Jung spoke of archetypes as images that arise spontaneously from the collective unconscious. They are not taught but inherited, manifesting in dreams, myths, and symbols across cultures. The firmament fits this definition with eerie precision. It appears everywhere unbidden, as if carried in humanity's deepest memory. It is archetype of boundary, symbol of order, mirror of mind. The boon, then, is awareness. To know the firmament as archetype is to understand ourselves. It is to see why myths endure even when disproven, why domes rise even when demolished. Why the sky feels like ceiling even when it is void. It is to recognize that the firmament tells us less about the heavens and more about ourselves. This recognition does not diminish the dome, it elevates it. For what archetypes reveal is not the structure of the world, but the structure of the soul. The firmament shows us that we are creatures who long for shelter, who fear infinity, who carve boundaries into chaos to survive. To see this is to drink the elixir of myth transformed into wisdom. And yet, the boon also carries a warning. Archetypes are powerful, but they can enslave. To mistake the dome for fact when it is symbol is to be trapped by it. To cling to the firmament as literal ceiling is to close ourselves off from the infinite. The boon is not the dome itself, but the knowledge that the dome is archetype. To wield it wisely is to use its power without succumbing to its prison. So what then does the archetype of the dome mean for us today? Perhaps it tells us why conspiracy theories about hidden firmaments resonate so deeply. They offer not only rebellion but archetypal comfort, re-enclosing us in a cosmos we can grasp. Perhaps it explains why science itself cannot avoid dome-like metaphors, for even in equations we carry the need for boundaries. Perhaps it warns us that, in our age of infinity, infinite space, infinite data, infinite choice, we may need domes more than ever, not as ceilings of fact, but as metaphors of meaning. The firmament, as archetype, thus becomes humanity's ultimate boon. It is the image that has followed us from the Ice Age to the Space Age, the ceiling we cannot escape, the shelter we cannot abandon, the symbol we cannot kill. Its persistence tells us that no matter how far we peer into infinity, we will always need domes to hold us, stories to frame us, ceilings to orient us. To understand the firmament as archetype is to accept both our limits and our power. We are not infinite beings, but finite minds, enclosed by perception, framed by symbols. Yet in those symbols lies our ability to endure, to create meaning in the void. The firmament is not real, but it is true. And so, the boon we bring back is not a dome above us, but a dome within us. The recognition that we are creatures of boundary, builders of ceilings, makers of meaning. The firmament, eternal archetype, will live as long as humanity does, for it is written not in the sky, but in the soul. The firmament is gone. The crystalline spheres, shattered. The bone dome of Ymir, dissolved into metaphor. The biblical vault of heaven, no longer taken as blueprint. And yet, as we stand beneath the modern night sky, gazing into telescopic depths where galaxies swirl like foam upon an endless tide, the question lingers: what does it mean to live without the dome? This is the new equilibrium. Humanity has passed through myth, through trial, through ordeal, through resurrection. We have stripped away the ceilings above us one after another until none remain. And now we face infinity directly, naked, unshielded, a species without a roof. It is easy to imagine this as triumph, and in many ways it is. We can send probes to the edges of the solar system, capture light from galaxies 13 billion years old, measure the faint afterglow of the Big Bang itself. We have transcended the ceilings that confined our ancestors. Knowledge has shattered the dome. But triumph is only part of the truth. For in this new equilibrium there is also loss. The firmament once gave humanity intimacy with the cosmos. It offered shelter, purpose, and order. Beneath it we were central, cherished, framed within a structure that made sense. Infinity offers no such comfort. It is grander, yes, but also colder. It gives us everything, and in so doing, takes away the sense that anything was ever ours. And so, living without the dome requires balance. A reconciliation between knowledge and meaning. Between the infinite void revealed by science and the eternal longing for ceilings revealed by myth. The firmament in its death teaches us how to live with both. We live in an age of paradox. Our instruments tell us the universe is expanding into cold darkness, galaxies accelerating away into silence, yet our imaginations still speak of domes, shells, horizons. Science reveals infinity, but our language circles back to ceilings. The firmament endures, not in glass or crystal, but in metaphor. It lives in the way we speak, the way we think, the way we dream. To live without the dome, then, does not mean to abandon it. It means to recognize its place. The firmament is no longer structure, it is symbol, no longer ceiling, it is story. And in that story, we find the balance our ancestors sought beneath their vaulted heavens. Perhaps this is the true gift of the journey. The knowledge that the firmament was never really about the sky. It was about us. It was about our need for boundaries, our fear of infinity, our longing for order. It was about how we frame existence to make it bearable. To live without the dome is not to deny those needs, but to understand them, to wield them with awareness rather than illusion. The dome is not real, but the truths it revealed, our need for shelter, our hunger for meaning, our awe before the vastness above, remain eternal. And in that sense, the firmament will never die. We stand now at the edge of knowledge, beneath a sky stripped of ceilings, enclosed only by the limits of light and time. And in this new equilibrium, we are asked a profound question. What will we build in the dome's absence? Will we collapse beneath infinity, or will we create new symbols, new stories, new metaphors to give shape to the chaos? The firmament's gift is not that it once enclosed us, but that it shows us we are beings who cannot live without ceilings. And so, even in the infinite void, we will build them anew, in art, in science, in faith, in imagination. We will project domes of meaning across the stars, not because they are real, but because we are human. This is our balance. Knowledge without meaning collapses into despair. Myth without knowledge hardens into superstition. But together, they create the new equilibrium, a humanity that can look into infinity and still find itself reflected there. And so the firmament's journey is complete. From bone to crystal, from myth to science, from ceiling to metaphor, it has accompanied us across millennia. It has fallen, risen, transformed. And now, in this final act, it hands us the elixir of wisdom, that ceilings are not given by the cosmos, but created by us. We are not sheltered beneath domes of glass. We are builders of domes within. And it is these inner firmaments of story, of imagination, of meaning, that will carry us through the void. As the night sky stretches overhead, vast and indifferent, let us remember this. The stars do not require ceilings, but we do. And so long as humanity endures, so too will the firmament, eternal in symbol, alive in archetype, guiding us still. The dome has fallen, the firmament is gone, and yet, in every story we tell, in every ceiling we build, in every metaphor we speak, it lives. The new equilibrium is not a sky of crystal, but a cosmos of meaning, not a dome of glass, but a boundary of mind. And so, the final question remains, echoing through the silence of infinite space. If the firmament is gone, but we cannot live without it, what new domes will we build to shelter us in the age of infinity? We began with ceilings of bone and shell, with domes of crystal and scripture, with stars pinned to vaults that made sense of the night. For thousands of years, the firmament was our shelter, our cosmic home. It gave us a place within the vastness, a roof above our heads, a promise that the universe was not endless chaos, but ordered, meaningful, framed. But we shattered it. Copernicus moved us from the center. Galileo pierced the heavens with his lens. Newton bound the planets not in shells, but in gravity. One by one, the ceilings fell. The firmament, once the axis of creation, dissolved into illusion, and in its place stretched something colder, stranger, more terrifying than any dome, infinity. And yet, the story does not end with its death. For even in the age of satellites and supercolliders, we find ourselves haunted by ceilings. Cosmic horizons encircle us. Event horizons seal off knowledge. The universe itself reveals boundaries written not in crystal, but in the fabric of space and time. Science, which killed the dome, has resurrected it in new guises. The firmament returns, not as myth, but as physics. But perhaps the truest resurrection lies elsewhere. The dome never lived only in the sky. It has always lived in us. We build it into our cathedrals, our metaphors, our art. We speak of glass ceilings and horizons of knowledge. Even in our most modern stories, the firmament reappears, cloaked in new language but carrying the same weight. The reminder that we are beings who long for shelter, who carve boundaries into chaos, who cannot live beneath infinity unframed. So the firmament endures, not because it was real, but because it is true. It is the archetype of order, the eternal image of a ceiling between the known and the unknown. And so we end where we began, beneath a sky, once imagined as dome, now revealed as void. Yet the question remains, echoing louder than ever. If the firmament is gone, but we cannot live without ceilings, then what new domes will we build to shelter ourselves in the age of infinity? Thank you for joining us on this extraordinary journey through the cosmos here on Frontiers of Infinity. If this glimpse into the unknown has sparked your curiosity, be sure to subscribe and join us each Friday at 7 p.m. Eastern, where we unravel the darkest mysteries of space.